The breaking point, Ruby Ashford stared at her phone screen, watching the numbers in her bank account mock her existence. $312? That was all that stood between her and complete disaster. Her landlord had already slipped the third eviction notice under her door, and her stomach had been growling for so long she barely noticed it anymore. The employment agency waiting room smelled like broken dreams and cheap air freshener. Ruby sat in a plastic chair that squeaked every time she shifted, surrounded by other desperate souls clutching folders and forcing hopeful smiles. She had been to 17 interviews in the past month. 17 rejections. Miss Ashford. The receptionist's voice cut through the quiet, desperation hanging in the air. Ruby looked up from mentally calculating how many days she could survive on ramen noodles and tap water. The receptionist, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes behind thick glasses, gestured for Ruby to approach the desk. "I know you came in for the marketing assistant position," the woman said quietly, sliding a paper across the desk. "But I have something different. Something that pays much better." Ruby's eyes landed on the salary figure and her heart stopped. This had to be a mistake. Nobody paid that much for an assistant position unless they were running some kind of illegal operation. "What's wrong with it?" Ruby asked bluntly. She had learned the hard way that if something looked too good to be true, it usually involved pyramid schemes or selling your soul. The receptionist's smile turned sympathetic. "The position is legitimate. It's just that the employer is particularly challenging to work with. You would be the 32nd person to attempt this role. 32 assistants?" Ruby felt her eyebrows climb toward her hairline. "In how long?" 18 months. The silence that followed was broken only by the hum of fluorescent lights and the sound of Ruby's common sense screaming at her to run. But then her stomach growled again, loud enough that the receptionist heard it. The employer is Dominic Harrington. Even Ruby, who had been living under a rock of financial survival, knew that name. Dominic Harrington was the youngest CEO to build a billion-dollar empire from nothing. He was also famous for being absolutely ruthless in business and impossibly difficult in personality. Meeting the dragon 24 hours later, Ruby stood before a building that seemed to touch the clouds. The Harrington Industries tower was all glass and steel, reflecting the morning sun like a warning beacon. She smoothed down her black blazer, purchased from a consignment shop but presentable enough to pass inspection. The elevator ride to the top floor felt like ascending toward her doom. When the doors opened, Ruby stepped into an office that screamed wealth and power. Everything was sleek, modern, and probably cost more than her annual salary at her last 3 jobs combined. Miss Ashford. An elegant woman with silver hair approached, extending her hand warmly. "I'm Patricia Grayson, the senior executive assistant. Mr. Harrington is finishing a call. But I wanted to speak with you first." They settled into a small conference room where Patricia studied Ruby with shrewd but kind eyes. "Tell me honestly," Patricia said, "why do you want this position?" Ruby considered lying, crafting some story about career growth and professional development. Instead, exhaustion and desperation made her honest. "Because I'm 3 weeks from being homeless. Because I haven't eaten a real meal in 5 days. Because that salary would change my entire life, and I'm willing to endure just about anything for that chance." Patricia's expression softened with something like respect. Refreshingly honest. "Last question, and this one matters. Are you resilient?" Ruby thought about the past year. Losing her previous job when the company downsized, watching her savings evaporate, applying to hundreds of positions and hearing nothing but silence, surviving on hope and stubbornness alone. "I'm still standing," Ruby said simply. "That should tell you everything." Patricia smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes. "Then let's see if you survive him." The first encounter Dominic Harrington's office was larger than most apartments Ruby had lived in. Floor 2 ceiling windows offered a view of the city that made her feel small and insignificant. But it was the man standing with his back to her that made her breath catch. He was on the phone, voice clipped with barely contained fury. "I don't accept excuses, Morrison. I accept results. You have 24 hours to fix this disaster, or I'll find someone who can." He hung up and turned around, and Ruby understood immediately why assistants ran screaming. Dominic Harrington was devastating. Tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair and eyes so intensely blue, they seemed to see straight through to your soul. He wore his expensive suit-like armor, and his expression suggested he could destroy you with a single word. Miss Ashford. His voice was deep, commanding. Sit. Ruby sat, trying to project confidence she didn't feel. I'll be direct, Dominic said, not bothering with pleasantries. This isn't a normal job. I work 16-hour days. I travel without notice. I have zero tolerance for mistakes, delays, or weakness. Your predecessors lasted an average of 2 weeks before quitting, crying, or both. He leaned forward, his blue eyes boring into hers. Why should you be different? Ruby took a deep breath. This was it. The moment that would determine her future, because I've already lost everything. Mr. Harrington, when you have nothing left to lose, you'd be surprised what you can survive. Something shifted in his expression. A flicker of interest, perhaps even respect. Continue. I have no illusions about who you are or what this job entails. You're difficult, demanding, and probably impossible to please. But I also know that salary will save my life. I'm willing to work harder than anyone you've ever hired because failure isn't an option for me anymore. The silence stretched between them like a test. Dominic studied her face, as if searching for cracks in her armor. You're hired, he said finally. 3-month trial period. If you survive, we'll discuss permanent employment. Relief flooded through Ruby so powerfully she had to grip the chair to stay steady. Thank you, Mr. Harrington. I won't disappoint you. We'll see. Glanced at his watch. You start immediately. I need you to reschedule my 2 o'clock meeting, confirm tonight's dinner reservation, and handle the press inquiries about the Thornton merger. The answer is no comment. Ruby blinked. Mr. Harrington, I haven't been trained on your systems yet. One dark eyebrow rose, and she realized she had just made her first mistake. Miss Ashford. From this moment forward, I don't know how ceases to be acceptable. Find a way. That's what I pay you for. The unexpected turned 6 hours later. Ruby collapsed into the chair Patricia had assigned her, head spinning from information overload. She had somehow managed to reschedule the meeting, confirm the dinner, and deflect 3 persistent reporters, all while learning a computer system that seemed designed by someone who hated humanity. Still breathing? Patricia appeared with coffee, which Ruby accepted like it was liquid gold. Barely, Ruby admitted. Does it always feel like being thrown into the deep end of a shark tank? Every single day. Patricia's smile was sympathetic. But you're doing better than most. He hasn't yelled at you once. Before Ruby could respond, Dominic's voice came through the intercom. Miss Ashford, my office. Now. Ruby exchanged a look with Patricia, who made an encouraging gesture. She walked back into what she had started thinking of as the Dragon's Den, expecting another impossible task. Dominic stood at the window, his posture tense. Change of plans. I have dinner tonight with investors. It's at that new French restaurant downtown. 8 o'clock. I already confirmed it, Ruby said carefully. I know. He turned to face her, and something in his expression was different. Vulnerable, almost. I need you to join me. Ruby's mind went blank. I'm sorry, what? The investors are bringing their wives. They'll expect me to have someone with me. My date canceled at the last minute, and I need someone who can hold an intelligent conversation without embarrassing me. This had to be a test, or a joke, or some kind of trap. Mr. Harrington, I'm your assistant. Wouldn't it be more appropriate to find an actual date? Do you think I have time to arrange that in 3 hours? His frustration was evident. This is part of your job, Miss Ashford. Solving problems. This is a problem. Ruby thought about her tiny apartment, her empty refrigerator, and the eviction notice sitting on her counter. She thought about the salary that could change everything. What time should I be ready? She asked quietly. Something like relief crossed his face. I'll have a car pick you up at 7:30. Patricia will help you find something appropriate to wear that evening. Dressed in a borrowed dress that actually fit, and seated across from Dominic in a restaurant where the menu didn't list prices, Ruby felt like she had stepped into someone else's life. The dinner was surprisingly pleasant. Dominic was charming when he wanted to be. Ruby found herself actually enjoying the conversation with the investors and their kind wives as they left the restaurant. Dominic held the car door open for her. "You did well tonight," he said, and it sounded almost like a compliment. "Thank you." He studied her face in the dim light from the street lamps. "You're different from what I expected." "Different how?" "Most people are afraid of me. You're not." Ruby considered this. "I am afraid of you, Mr. Harrington, just not in the way you think." Before he could ask what she meant, the car arrived and the moment passed. But as Ruby rode home in luxury she had never experienced, she realized something dangerous had happened. She had liked spending the evening with Dominic Harrington, and that was the most terrifying thing of all. Crisis in the clouds. Ruby woke to her phone buzzing at 4 in the morning. Still half asleep, she fumbled for it and saw a message from Dominic. "Emergency trip to Chicago. Car picks you up in 45 minutes. Pack for 2 days." 45 minutes. Ruby launched herself out of bed, threw clothes into a bag, and was standing on the sidewalk when the black car pulled up exactly on time. The driver, a professional man who introduced himself as Henry, drove her to a private airfield where a sleek jet waited on the tarmac. Dominic was already on board. Looking impeccable in a charcoal suit despite the ungodly hour, he glanced up from his laptop as she entered. "Good morning, Miss Ashford. We have a situation. Our Chicago division is hemorrhaging money, and I need to fix it before the board finds out." Ruby settled into a cream leather seat that probably cost more than her car. "What can I do to help?" "Take notes during the meetings. Research the employees I'll be interviewing. And try not to look terrified when I start firing people." The flight attendant appeared, a polished woman named Rebecca, who brought Dominic breakfast. Fresh fruit, artisan coffee, and pastries that smelled like heaven. For Ruby, just a polite smile and nothing. Ruby's stomach chose that exact moment to announce its emptiness with a growl that echoed through the cabin. Dominic paused mid-bite, one eyebrow raised. "When did you last eat?" "I had dinner last night," Ruby said quickly. Not mentioning that dinner had been crackers and peanut butter, he studied her for a long moment, then slid his plate across the table between them. "Eat, Mr. Harrington. I couldn't possibly take your breakfast, Miss Ashford. I need you functional, not fainting from hunger. Eat. That's an order." The fruit was perfect, sweet and fresh. The pastry melted on her tongue. Ruby tried to eat delicately, but after days of surviving on almost nothing, she had to force herself not to devour everything in seconds. "You're not eating enough," Dominic said, his voice quieter than usual. "Are you having financial difficulties?" Ruby's cheeks burned. "I'm managing. That's not what I asked." "God." She set down her fork, meeting his eyes. "The first paycheck hasn't come through yet, and I was in a difficult position before starting this job. But I'm handling it." Something shifted in his expression. Without a word, he pulled out his phone and typed rapidly. 30 seconds later, Ruby's phone buzzed with a notification. She glanced at the screen and felt her heart stop. A direct deposit. Enough to cover her rent, her bills, and buy real food for a month. "Mr. Harrington, I can't accept this. It's too much. Consider it an advance on your salary. You're no use to me if you're distracted by survival." But his tone was gentler than his words suggested. The rest of the flight passed in comfortable silence. But Ruby couldn't stop stealing glances at the man across from her. Beneath the ruthless exterior, there were glimpses of something else. Something almost kind. The performance begins. The Chicago meetings were brutal. Ruby watched Dominic dismantle excuses, restructure entire departments, and make grown men squirm with nothing but questions and silence. He was brilliant and terrifying in equal measure. During a lunch break, Patricia called with urgent news. "There's a charity gala tomorrow night in New York," she said, her voice tense. "Vanessa Caldwell will be there with her new husband. The press will be watching Dominic's every move." Ruby's stomach sank. She had researched Dominic's history. Vanessa Caldwell, now Vanessa Montgomery, was the woman who had destroyed him. Beautiful, wealthy, and cruel. She had left Dominic 3 days before their wedding for a man with an older family name. When Ruby relayed the information to Dominic, His face became a mask of ice. "We're cutting the Chicago trip short. We fly back tonight." "What about the gala?" He looked at her with an expression she couldn't read. "I need a date. Someone who won't fall apart under Vanessa's scrutiny." Ruby's heart started pounding. "You want me to go with you?" "Unless you have a better suggestion." "I won't give Vanessa the satisfaction of seeing me show up alone." The transformation the next morning. Dominic took Ruby to a boutique in Manhattan where everything looked too expensive to touch. An elegant saleswoman named Claire greeted them with obvious familiarity. "Mr. Harrington, always a pleasure. And who is this lovely lady?" "Ruby needs something spectacular for tonight," Dominic said, settling into a plush chair. "Price is no object." Ruby tried on dress after dress, while Dominic rejected each one with a single word. Too safe, too plain, too forgettable. After the 9th rejection, Ruby's patience snapped. "Maybe if you told me what you actually want instead of what you don't want, we could make progress." Dominic's lips quirked in what might have been almost a smile. "I want something that will make Vanessa realize exactly what she lost." The honesty in his voice caught Ruby off guard. For a moment, she saw past the billionaire facade to the man who had been hurt deeply. "She destroyed you," Ruby said softly. "She taught me that love is a liability." His voice was matter-of-fact, but his hands clenched. 3 days before our wedding, she decided she preferred someone with better social connections. "Oh, then she's an idiot," Ruby said firmly. Something flickered in his eyes. "You think so?" "I know so." Claire returned then with one more dress, a deep sapphire blue that shimmered like water. When Ruby emerged from the fitting room, the boutique fell silent. The dress was perfect. It hugged her curves while remaining elegant, made her auburn hair glow, and somehow made her feel beautiful and powerful at the same time. "Well," she asked nervously. Dominic stood slowly, his blue eyes traveling from her face to her feet and back again. When their eyes met, there was something in his gaze that made her breath catch. "Perfect," he said, his voice rough. "Absolutely perfect." Facing the past, the charity gala was everything Ruby had feared and more. Crystal chandeliers, designer gowns, and enough wealth in one room to feed a small country. Dominic moved through the crowd with practiced ease, his hand warm and possessive on the small of her back. "Remember," he murmured in her ear, "we've been dating for 2 months. You're brilliant, ambitious, and completely enchanted by me." Enchanted. Right. Ruby tried to steady her racing heart. "Harrington." The voice was honey poured over ice. They turned to face a woman who looked like she had been carved from porcelain and dressed in diamonds. Vanessa Caldwell Montgomery stood with a bland-looking man who had to be her husband, her smile sharp as a knife. "Vanessa." Dominic's voice was smooth as silk. "You look well, as do you." Her gaze slid to Ruby with undisguised curiosity. "And you are?" "Ruby Ashford." Ruby extended her hand with more confidence than she felt. "How charming." "And how did you two meet?" "Ruby works for me," Dominic said, his arm sliding around Ruby's waist. Though work became complicated rather quickly. The way he said it, with just the right amount of warmth, made even Ruby almost believe it. "Dating your assistant?" Vanessa's smile turned predatory. "How very modern of you. When you find something rare and valuable," Dominic said, pulling Ruby closer, "you don't let arbitrary boundaries stand in your way." Vanessa's composure cracked just slightly. Ruby realized with shock that the woman was jealous. After Vanessa and her husband walked away, Ruby realized she was trembling. "You okay?" Dominic asked quietly. "She's terrifying. She's threatened." His hand was still on her waist, warm and steady. "Did you see how she looked at you? Like she realized she made a terrible mistake." "Dance with me," he said suddenly. "What?" "Vanessa is watching. Dance with me." The music was slow and romantic. Dominic led her onto the dance floor with natural grace. Pulling her close enough that she could smell his cologne and feel the warmth of his body. "You're a good dancer," she murmured. "Private lessons," Mother insisted. His hand spread across her back. "You're not bad yourself." "YouTube tutorials," he laughed. Actually laughed. And the sound did dangerous things to her heart. They swayed together in comfortable silence until a photographer appeared. "Mr. Harrington, mind if I get a quick shot?" The flash went off before either could object, capturing them in a moment that looked far more intimate than any fake relationship had a right to be. When everything changes the next morning, Ruby woke to her phone exploding with notifications. She grabbed it and felt the world tilt. Her face was on the front page of every gossip site and newspaper. The headlines screamed, "Harrington's mystery woman, billionaire bad boy tamed, who is Ruby Ashford?" Her phone rang. Patricia's voice was strained. "Have you seen the papers?" "I'm looking at them now. Dominic has been in his office since 5 this morning. He's in what I call controlled fury mode, which is worse than regular fury. You should probably get here." The elevator ride to Dominic's office felt like ascending to her execution. When she entered, newspapers covered his desk, and he stood at the window with his back to her. "Mr. Harrington." He turned slowly, and she saw the cold anger in his eyes. "Miss Ashford, how nice of you to join me for this disaster. I'm sorry. I know this complicates things." "Complicates?" His laugh was bitter. "I have reporters calling my mother, TMZ following my staff, and according to the tabloids, we're secretly engaged. That's ridiculous, is it?" He moved closer. "Because I've been thinking about last night." "About that dance?" "About the way you looked at me. I was acting like you told me to." "Were you?" His blue eyes searched her face, because for a moment there, it felt very real. The air between them crackled with tension. Ruby wanted to deny it, to laugh it off. Instead, she found herself staring at his mouth. "I don't know what you want me to say," she whispered. Before he could respond, his phone rang. He glanced at the caller ID, and his expression darkened further. "Vanessa," he said coldly into the phone. "How thoughtful of you to call." Ruby could hear the other woman's voice, sweet and venomous. "My personal life stopped being your concern the day you chose someone else," Dominic said. "Let me be clear. What I do and who I see is none of your business." He listened for a moment, his jaw tightening. "If you threaten Ruby again, you'll regret it. She has more strength in her little finger than you have in your entire body." He hung up and turned to Ruby. "She threatened you, said she'd make your life difficult if you didn't disappear. And what did you tell her? That anyone who tries to hurt you will have to go through me first." The words hung between them, loaded with implications neither was ready to face. "Why?" Ruby whispered. "Because you don't deserve to be collateral damage in my past." He paused. "And because you're the first real thing that's happened to me in years." Ruby's heart pounded. "Dominic, what are we doing?" "I don't know," he admitted. "But I'm scared we're not pretending anymore." "So am I." They stood in the morning light, two people who had stumbled into something neither understood but both were afraid to lose. Outside, the world hummed with chaos and complications. But in this moment, there was only truth hanging between them like a promise, the breaking. Point Monday morning arrived like an executioner's blade. Ruby walked into Dominic's office expecting many things after their confession, but not the ice-cold stranger who greeted her. "This has to stop." Dominic's voice was clipped, professional, distant. He didn't even look up from his desk. Ruby's stomach dropped. "What has to stop?" "This." He gestured sharply between them. "Us. Whatever this pretense has become." The word pretense hit her like a physical blow. "I see. The board is concerned about my recent decisions. Vanessa has been spreading rumors about my stability. And frankly, Miss Ashford, I've allowed personal feelings to cloud my judgment. That ends now." Each word was delivered with surgical precision, designed to cut deep. And they did. "So last week was a mistake," Ruby said, keeping her voice steady through sheer force of will. "We both got caught up in the performance. It happens." His tone suggested he was discussing quarterly reports, not destroying her heart. Of course. How silly of me. Finally, he looked at her, and for a moment, she saw pain flash across his face before he shuddered it away. "We're prepared to offer you a substantial severance package. Enough to set you up comfortably. You're firing me. I'm releasing you from an impossible situation before it gets worse." "Worse for whom?" Ruby demanded, anger finally breaking through the hurt. For both of us. You don't belong in this world, Ruby. The media attention, the threats, the constant scrutiny. You deserve better than being collateral damage in my life. Shouldn't that be my decision? Not when you don't understand the consequences. Ruby's hands clenched into fists. Don't you dare stand there and tell me I don't understand consequences. I've lived with consequences my entire life. Every choice, every risk, every dollar spent. You don't get to decide what I can handle. Something cracked in his composure. You think this is easy for me? I think this is cowardly. The word hung between them like a slap. You're scared. Scared of what you feel? Scared of being vulnerable again. So you're running and you're using my protection as an excuse. That's not what this is. It's exactly what this is. You told me I was yours, Dominic. You said you'd protect what was yours. Well, you can't protect me from yourself by throwing me away. Her voice broke on the last word, and she saw him flinch. Ruby, please. No. She held up a hand, gathering the shreds of her dignity. You've made yourself clear. You want me gone? Fine. But don't insult my intelligence by pretending this is for my own good. She turned toward the door, then paused. For what it's worth, I wasn't confused about anything last week. I knew exactly what I was saying and feeling. It's a shame you didn't. The courage to stand Patricia was waiting outside with tissues and sympathy. He's an idiot. He was my boss, Ruby said numbly. He's a scared man who doesn't know how to handle someone actually loving him for who he is instead of what he has. Patricia grabbed her arm. Don't let him do this. Before Ruby could respond, Dominic's voice came through the intercom. Patricia, please have security escort Miss Ashford from the building. The dismissal was so cold, so final, that Ruby felt something inside her chest shatter completely. 2 security guards appeared, looking uncomfortable. Ruby gathered her few personal belongings. A coffee mug, a small plant, a photo of her mother, and walked toward the elevator with her head held high as the doors closed. She heard Patricia's voice, loud and furious. Dominic Harrington, you are making the biggest mistake of your life. Outside the building, Ruby's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number? Coffee? We should talk, Vanessa. Ruby stared at the message. Every instinct screamed at her to ignore it, to run, to hide. Instead, she typed back, name the place. The coffee shop was expensive and pretentious, exactly where someone like Vanessa would feel comfortable. The woman herself sat at a corner table looking flawless in cream cashmere. Ruby, darling. Vanessa's smile was sharp. You look well, considering. Cut the act, Vanessa. What do you want? Straight to the point. I appreciate that. Vanessa stirred her coffee with delicate precision. I want you to disappear from Dominic's life permanently. From what I hear, he's already started that process himself. Good. Then we understand each other. Ruby leaned forward. Let me tell you what I understand. You're a woman who threw away something real because you were too shallow to see its value. Now you're watching him move on, and it's killing you. Vanessa's perfect composure cracked slightly. You think you know him? I know he deserves better than games and manipulation. Better than someone who measures worth by social status and family connections. And you think you're better? Vanessa's laugh was cruel. You're nobody, Ruby. A struggling assistant with student loans and a mother who works in a diner. What could you possibly offer him? Ruby stood, looking down at Vanessa with newfound clarity. The truth. Honesty. Someone who sees him as a man, not a bank account or a status symbol. You're right that I'm nobody special. But Dominic chose me anyway. And that must really bother you. She walked out before Vanessa could respond. Feeling lighter than she had in days, the battle for everything. 3 days after Dominic broke her heart, Ruby received a text from Patricia. Board meeting today. Emergency vote on Dominic's position. Come. Ruby stood outside the Harrington Industries building, wearing her original thrift store suit and carrying a folder with everything she had learned about the company. This was insane. This was professional suicide. This was absolutely necessary. The office was chaos when she arrived. Employees rushed between departments, phones rang constantly, and the air crackled with crisis energy. Patricia grabbed her immediately. Thank God. Vanessa has convinced 3 major investors that Dominic is unstable. They're trying to force him out as CEO. Can they do that? If the board votes for it, yes. The meeting starts in 15 minutes. Where is he? In his office, probably planning to resign with dignity instead of fighting. Ruby squared her shoulders. Take me to him. Dominic's office felt different. The energy that had always hummed beneath the surface was gone, replaced by something defeated. He stood at the window in a navy suit, looking like a man preparing for execution. Patricia, I said I don't want to be disturbed. He turned and stopped when he saw Ruby. What are you doing here? Stopping you from being an idiot, Ruby. This isn't your concern anymore. Wrong. This is entirely my concern because I love you. And I'm not letting you throw away everything you've built because you're scared. He flinched. You don't understand what's at stake. I understand that Vanessa is manipulating the board. I understand that you're planning to surrender instead of fight. And I understand that you're about to prove her right by giving up. The board members aren't wrong. I have been making emotional decisions. You've been making human decisions. Ruby moved closer. For the first time in your adult life, you've been acting like a man instead of a machine. And yes, that terrifies you. But it also makes you a better leader. The intercom crackled. Mr. Harrington, the board is assembled. Dominic closed his eyes. I have to go. Then I'm coming with you. Absolutely not. Try and stop me. The final stand, the boardroom, was a battlefield disguised as a conference room. 12 stern-faced board members sat around a massive table, while Vanessa perched in the corner like a vulture waiting for death. Gentlemen, Dominic began, his voice steady. I understand there are concerns about my recent performance. Concerns? Harrison Blackwell, the board chairman, interrupted. Dominic, you've been erratic and unprofessional. This business with your assistant, the media circus, it's unacceptable. The public displays of a man clearly not in control, Vanessa added smoothly. That's when Ruby stepped into the room. The silence was deafening. 12 pairs of eyes turned to her, ranging from curious to hostile. I apologize for interrupting, Ruby said calmly, but I couldn't help overhearing. You're discussing my former employer's fitness for leadership. Miss, this is a private board meeting, Harrison began. Ruby Ashford. And you're right, this is private. Which makes it fascinating that Mrs. Montgomery is here, considering she has no official connection to this company. Vanessa's composure cracked. I have a legitimate interest in ensuring this company's stability. You have a legitimate interest in destroying the man who moved on from you, Ruby corrected. But let's talk about stability. You want to remove Dominic Harrington because he's been emotional? Let me tell you what I've seen. She moved to stand beside Dominic, drawing strength from his presence. I've seen a man who works 16-hour days because he cares about every person in this company. I've seen him mentor junior executives, remember security guards' children's names, and donate millions to charity without seeking publicity. You think he's distracted? He closed the Davidson acquisition ahead of schedule. You think he's unstable? Company profits increased 30% this quarter. And what qualifies you to make these assessments? Vanessa asked coldly. I'm the woman who loves him, Ruby said simply. I'm the woman who's seen him at his best and worst. And I'm here to tell you that removing him would be the biggest mistake in this company's history. The room erupted in murmurs. Harrison banged his gavel. This is highly irregular, so is staging a coup based on gossip and revenge, Dominic said, finding his voice. I've given everything to this company. If falling in love makes me unfit to lead, then perhaps you need to examine what kind of leaders you want. Oh, this is absurd. Vanessa stood, her face flushed with anger. You're all being manipulated by some gold-digging nobody who has nothing. Enough. The voice was Gwendolyn Harrington's. Cutting through the chaos like a sword, Dominic's mother stood in the doorway, elegant and formidable in a burgundy suit. She walked into the room with the confidence of a woman who had built empires. Vanessa, you've said quite enough. Gwendolyn's voice was ice. Gentlemen, I may not have a vote here, but I have a voice. And I'm telling you that removing my son would be the height of foolishness. She moved to stand with Dominic and Ruby, a united front. Harrison, you've known Dominic since he was a boy. You've watched him build this company from nothing. Are you really going to let a vindictive woman destroy everything he's accomplished because she can't handle rejection? Harrison looked uncomfortable. The other board members shifted in their seats. I move to table this discussion, one of them said finally. Pending further investigation into the claims against Mr. Harrington. Seconded, another added quickly. The vote was swift. 10-2 in favor of tabling the motion. Vanessa's face turned white with rage as she stormed from the room. New beginnings after the boardroom cleared. Dominic turned to Ruby. His blue eyes were shining with something that looked like wonder. You came back, he said quietly. After everything I said, everything I did, you came back and fought for me. Of course I did. Ruby's voice was steady. That's what you do when you love someone. You fight for them, even when they're too scared to fight for themselves. I was terrified, he admitted, of losing the company, of being vulnerable, of needing someone. But watching you stand up to the board, watching you fight for me when I didn't deserve it, I realized something. What's that? That losing you would be far worse than losing everything else combined. He took her hands, and she felt the tremor in his fingers. I love you, Ruby Ashford. I think I started falling the moment you told me you had nothing to lose. You're brave and honest and real in a way I'd forgotten existed. And if you'll give me another chance, I promise to never be stupid enough to push you away again. Ruby felt tears streaming down her face. You're sure? Because I'm still nobody special. I'm still just a girl with student loans and a mother who works in a diner. You're the woman who saved me, Dominic said, pulling her close. From myself, from my fear, from a life without real connection. That makes you the most special person I've ever known. He kissed her then, soft and gentle and full of promise. When they broke apart, Ruby saw Gwendolyn watching them with a satisfied smile. About time, his mother said. Ruby dear, welcome to the family. I expect you for Sunday dinner every week. I'd like that, Ruby said, laughing through her tears. Patricia appeared in the doorway, grinning. So, Miss Ashford, does this mean you're accepting your old position back? With a substantial raise, of course. Ruby looked at Dominic, who was still holding her close. Actually, I think I might need a new title. Girlfriend seems more appropriate than assistant. How about both? Dominic suggested. You're brilliant at the job when I'm not being an idiot and firing you. Then yes, Ruby said. To both. 6 months later, Ruby would stand in a different boardroom as Dominic announced their engagement to thunderous applause. A year after that, she would walk down the aisle toward the man who had started as her possible boss and become her everything. But in this moment, standing in the aftermath of battle with Dominic's arms around her and their future spreading out before them like an open road, Ruby knew something with absolute certainty. Sometimes the best things in life come from taking a chance on the impossible. Sometimes love finds you when you're desperate and broken. And sometimes the story everyone said would end in disaster becomes the greatest love story ever told.